My son smashed my husband's urn, searching for the will, but he had no idea I was the one who hid the truth. It was early January in California, but the cold inside the house felt sharper than the wind outside. The heater barely worked, or rather, I was never allowed to turn it on. "Want to be warm?" Annette sneered once, tossing me an old cardigan. "Try layering like the rest of us." I had learned to keep quiet, to stay in my corner of the living room, surrounded by photos of a life that no longer belonged to anyone but me. I was folding a dish towel when Dylan stomped in from the garage, slamming the door behind him so hard the floor shook. He looked at me like I was a stain he could not wash out of his perfect life. "Mom," he barked, "what do you even do around here? You just sit and breathe like the air is free. You do not earn, you do not clean, you just waste space." Before I could open my mouth, he yanked the towel from my hands. "You are sucking the oxygen out of this place like a corpse that forgot to lie down." I blinked at him. It still hurt, hearing him speak like that, even after all these years. I had raised that voice, fed it soup, read it bedtime stories while holding Michael's hand. That voice had once called me Mommy and cried when I left for work. Now it only knew how to curse. He started pacing, eyes wild, muttering to himself as he pulled open drawers, tossing papers and old receipts across the room. "She is hiding it. I know she is. That will has to be somewhere. That old bastard would never die without writing something. Where is it? In the freezer? Behind the damn picture frames? You think I will not check your stupid prayer box?" I stepped toward him. "Dylan, there is no need to—" "Shut up." His hand shot up like a stop sign. "Say one more word about what Dad wanted, and I swear I will have you packed and in a care facility by tomorrow. You think you are still worth something? You are not. You are a squatter in a house I am trying to fix before it collapses." I stood there, heart hammering, but I did not cry. He stormed over to the small table by the fireplace, the one where I kept my favorite framed photo, Michael in uniform, holding me close on our anniversary. He knocked it to the ground with a loud crack. The glass splintered, and then he saw the urn. "Of course," he said, laughing like a hyena. "Of course. That sneaky bastard. Bet he stuffed it in here." He grabbed the urn off the mantel with both hands. I ran forward. "Dylan, please." Too late. He smashed it to the ground. It did not just break. It exploded. White ceramic flew in all directions, and with it, the ashes of the only man who ever truly saw me. I dropped to my knees. Not to scream, not to fight, but to pick up the pieces, carefully, one by one. Some ash clung to my skin. I let it. I wanted to feel Michael one last time. "Congratulations," Dylan muttered. "Now you can sweep him up, too." I did not answer. I just opened my purse and placed the broken fragments inside. Then I stood, slowly, calmly, as if the act of rising would somehow restore my dignity. "If you choose violence to find truth," I said, voice low but clear, "then I will choose truth to expose your lies." He scoffed. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" I walked away. The photo frame still lay on the floor, the glass broken, but the image untouched. Michael's eyes smiled at me through the cracked plastic. I remembered what he'd told me 2 days before the stroke, while we were drinking tea in the backyard. "If I go first," he said, "do not let them push you out. That house is yours, Lydia. Not because I say so, but because you made it a home." That promise, that memory, was the only warmth I had left. That night, Dylan locked the pantry, said I was eating too much for someone who did not contribute. Annette told me to get a job or get out, but I stayed. I stayed not because I was weak. I stayed because I was ready. Because I had just hidden the last camera in the hallway smoke detector, and the recorder under my knitting basket had captured every word, every insult, every lie, every threat. Let him dig through ashes for a will that never belonged to him. I had something stronger. Proof. It was not long after the urn broke that Dylan started acting nice. He brought me a cup of tea one morning, something he had not done in over 2 decades. "Mom," he said, "you know, you do not have to do everything alone. We are family." I stared at the mug in his hand. It was chipped, one of Michael's old favorites. The gesture was hollow. So was the smile on his face. It was the kind of grin people wear when they are selling you a lie they think you are too old to notice. That afternoon, he sat down across from me at the dining table, tapping his fingers on a stack of paperwork I had never seen before. "We need to talk about the house," he said casually, like we were discussing the weather. "No, Dylan," I said without hesitation. His smile flickered. "You don't even know what I'm going to say. You're going to ask me to sign the deed over to you. I'm not going to do that." He leaned back, his jaw tight. "Mom, you're nearly 80. What do you need a house for? You don't work. You don't pay the bills. You just sit here all day. Meanwhile, I'm busting my ass trying to keep this place afloat." I folded my hands calmly. "Your father left this house to me, not to you." He slammed his palm against the table. "God damn it, Mom, you're being selfish. Annette's threatening to leave me. We're drowning in debt. I could lose my job any day now and—" He stopped himself too late. So that was it. It had nothing to do with space, nothing to do with my comfort. It was about money. It always was. He leaned forward, voice low and venomous. "We've been scraping by while you sit here and do nothing. You know what that makes you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. "A parasite." That night I heard him pacing the hallway, whispering angrily on the phone. "She won't sign. Yeah, I know she's stubborn, but she's also losing it." I swear she asked the same question 3 times today. If I can get a psych eval, yeah. One of those reports that says she's not competent, then it's my signature that matters, not hers. I pressed the recorder beneath my pillow, heart pounding. Every word he said was being saved. 2 days later, a man in a white coat rang the doorbell. He introduced himself as Dr. Stanford, a home visit physician here for a routine senior wellness checkup. His smile was forced. His eyes kept darting to Dylan behind him, like a child checking with his parent for permission to speak. "We're just doing a cognitive screening today," he said, flipping open a clipboard. "Just some simple questions to ensure everything is in order." I played along. "What day is it?" he asked. "Tuesday." "What year?" 2025. "Who's the president? Do you mean the one you voted for or the one who actually won?" He did not laugh. He asked me to draw a clock. I drew a sundial and labeled it 2 p.m. He frowned. "Can you count backward from 100 by sevens?" I raised a son who can't even count past his overdue bills, so yes. When he left, I watched from the hallway window as he got into Dylan's car and took a fat white envelope in exchange for his services. The next morning, I went into the garage and retrieved the old wooden sewing box Michael had carved for me. Inside it, beneath the patches and buttons, was a smaller box, one with a lock only I had the key to. I had not opened it in years. My hands trembled as I turned the key. Inside, a single envelope, unopened, yellowing with time. The handwriting on it was unmistakable. Michael's. On the front, in blue ink, "To Lydia, for when you need to know." For all those years I had told myself I was not ready, that the grief was still too raw, that the letter would only break my heart all over again. But now, I needed more than memories. I needed truth. I did not open it yet. Instead, I began planting eyes and ears around the house. A camera hidden inside an old cookie tin on the bookshelf. A voice recorder tucked beneath the couch cushions. I replaced the batteries in everything, twice a week, logged dates and times like a soldier preparing for war. Dylan grew bolder, thinking I was weakening. "Mom," he said one day, tapping the paperwork again. "I just need your signature. That's all. You'll still live here. We'll just transfer ownership in case something happens. It's for tax reasons." "Are you sure it's not because you're broke?" His eyes turned dark. "You better watch your mouth." "And you better watch yours," I said, with a tone that even surprised me. He tried guilt. "Mom, I could lose everything. Annette is furious. She says I look like a fool living with my mother who won't help us." "She's right. You do look like a fool. But not for that." He tried fear. "I talked to a lawyer. If you're declared mentally incompetent, they'll give me power of attorney anyway." "I talked to one too," I said, standing. "And you'll be surprised what power I already have." That night I looked at the envelope again, still unopened, but this time I laid it gently on the nightstand. I knew the truth was inside, but the world outside needed proof, and I was just getting started. It started with the footsteps. Fast, heavy, thudding across the hallway like war drums. I was setting the kettle on the stove when Dylan stormed into the kitchen, fists clenched, eyes wild. He did not say a word at first, just stood there, breathing like a bull about to charge. "Where is it?" he barked. I turned slowly. Where is what? He slammed both palms onto the counter. Do not play games with me, Mom. The will. Where's the damn will? I told you there is no other will. You're lying. He was pacing now, tearing open drawers, tossing aside envelopes and old photo albums. You've hidden it somewhere. Is it in your pillow? Under the bed? Stuffed inside Dad's suit pockets? I followed him, my voice firm. Michael never told me he changed it. You're lying, he screamed. You're protecting him even now? That old man was always scheming. Of course he would hide it from me, probably tucked it away with all his precious books, right? He marched into the living room, yanking open cabinets, flipping cushions off the sofa. He ripped a blanket in half just to see if it was sewn inside. Then he turned to the mantel, the urn. The moment he looked at it, I stepped forward. No. His lips curled. What? Don't touch it. He took a step closer to the urn. I moved between him and it, shaking my head. It's not in there. You think I'm stupid? He spat. You think I don't know that's the one place no one would check? Maybe that old bastard thought it was clever. Maybe he thought putting it in his ashes would stop me from finding it. Dylan, stop. He grabbed the urn. Put it down, I said, my voice a whisper and a scream at once. Please. He looked right at me, looked through me, really. Then, with both hands, he slammed the urn to the floor. The crash was deafening. Porcelain exploded into white shards. Ash scattered across the hardwood, a pale gray cloud rising like smoke from a battlefield. My knees buckled. I fell to the floor without thinking, without feeling. My hands trembled as I reached out, touching the remnants of the man I had loved for 52 years. My Michael. Dylan stood over me, his chest heaving. That's what he gets, he muttered, scheming right to the grave. Betty thought he could outsmart me. He kicked my reading chair across the room. It hit the wall and splintered. I did not cry. I picked up one shard, then another. Some of them were sticky with the tears I had not realized were falling. I pulled a plastic sandwich bag from the drawer and began collecting the pieces, carefully, reverently. Dylan stared, as if waiting for me to scream. I did not. I simply said, If you choose violence to uncover the truth, then I will use the truth to expose you. He laughed bitterly. What truth, Mom? That you're losing your mind? That you talk to Dad's chair every night like he's still in it? That you've been hoarding letters and whispering to a locked box like it's a damn oracle? I stood up slowly, still holding the bag of ashes and porcelain. You broke more than a vase today, I said. You broke the last piece of your father that was still here. You think I care? He snapped. You think I'm going to let you ruin my future over a pile of dust? I looked at him, really looked at him. This was not the boy I raised. This was a man hollowed out by debt, poisoned by pride, desperate enough to destroy anything that reminded him he was once loved and still failed. He walked away, muttering something about lawyers and retirement homes. When the door slammed, silence returned. But it was not peace. It was war waiting to begin. That night I laid the bag of ashes beside me on the bed. I wrapped it in Michael's old scarf, the one I refused to wash because it still smelled faintly of cedarwood and pipe smoke. I whispered, I'm sorry. I whispered, I didn't stop him. And then I whispered, but I will make this right. Later, I returned to the sewing box and took out the letter again. I still had not opened it, but I placed it next to the scarf and lit a candle. Then I walked to the bookshelf, pulled the cookie tin forward, and checked the tiny blinking light inside. The camera was recording, just as it had been when Dylan smashed the urn, just as it had been when he screamed threats and tore apart my home. The truth was not just in a letter anymore. It was in the lens, in the microphone, in every file I had saved and every log I had documented. And the next time he came for me, I would be ready, because I was done being quiet. The morning after the urn shattered, I did not cry. I ironed my blouse, made myself a cup of weak coffee, and took out the small paper Rolodex from Michael's desk drawer, the one he had not updated since 1997. Flipping through the smudged index cards, I found it. Blackwell, Robert, attorney, Vietnam, 68. I dialed the number with fingers that only trembled when I stopped moving. It rang twice. Blackwell and Price, a voice answered, formal and flat. Is Robert there? I asked. A pause. Who's calling? Tell him it's Lydia Walker. Michael's wife. Silence, then the voice softened. One moment, please. The next voice was lower, slower. Lydia, I need your help, Robert. I figured I might be hearing from you someday. He came that afternoon. He was older now, gray in places I'd never imagined, but the eyes were the same, clear, focused, unwavering. We sat at the dining table and I told him everything. I laid it out like a confession. The screaming, the chair thrown across the room, the urn shattered on the floor, Dylan's threats, his forged diagnosis, his rage, his desperation. Robert sat in silence as I played him the footage from the hidden cameras. Dylan towering over me, yelling, the sound of porcelain breaking, my quiet vow. When it ended, Robert leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. He's gone too far. I know. I promised Michael, he said, almost to himself. He made me promise if anything ever happened to him, I'd look after you, that I'd protect you. I closed my eyes. He said the same thing to me, to stay in this house, that it was ours. Robert opened his briefcase. Then we're going to make sure it stays that way. In the days that followed, we began to build our defense, not just to protect me, but to expose him. Robert called in his own investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Tara who had once worked for the state bar. Together, we dug. I handed over my USB drives, weeks of footage, audio files time-stamped, conversations where Dylan said, once I prove she's nuts, that deed's mine. The day he whispered on the phone, the guy I hired has a license that's expired, but he plays the role well. We pulled bank statements, transfers from our family account into private ventures Dylan had no business touching. He'd sold part of the old ranch property years ago, the land Michael swore he would never give up, just to pay off some gambling debt. And then, one quiet Tuesday, Robert returned to my house with something in his hand, a sealed envelope. I believe this belongs to you. I stared at the handwriting. Michael's. I had never opened it. I had been too afraid of what I might find. But now, with Robert watching, I tore the seal and unfolded the pages. It was dated 2 years before Michael died. The language was clear and merciless. Dylan and his siblings were to be disinherited. All assets, including the home, the pension, and the mineral rights to the ranch, were left in full to me. The reason was stated plainly. For knowingly selling land that has belonged to the Walker family for over 3 generations, and for deceiving me in the process, I cannot, in good conscience, leave a legacy to those who traded our bloodline for a quick dollar. I blinked away tears. New, Robert nodded. And now we can prove it. We made certified copies of everything, the video files, the audio tapes, the will, the financial records. And then Robert filed a restraining order on my behalf. He drafted a cease and desist against Dylan for harassment and elder abuse. But that was only the beginning. He filed a civil suit, too, one that named Dylan directly for fraud, coercion, and abuse of a vulnerable senior. He requested a court hearing to recognize the valid will, to remove Dylan's false claims on the property, and to submit all our evidence to the judge. It would not be a quiet affair, and I no longer wanted it to be. I began sleeping with the lights on, not because I was afraid, but because I was watching the footage again and again, not to scare myself, but to strengthen my resolve. Every word Dylan had said, every insult, every time he called me a waste of air or said I was rotting while sitting, I memorized them, not out of pain, but for fuel, because when I stepped into that courtroom I would not cry, I would speak, and for the first time in years someone would finally hear me. They came back 3 days before the court hearing. I had just poured myself a cup of tea when the front door slammed open like they still owned the hinges. Dylan barged in first, face flushed with the kind of rage that comes from desperation, not power. Annette followed closely behind, sunglasses still on, as if she had somewhere more important to be than my living room. I stood still in the doorway between the kitchen and the den, the steam from my mug curling in the air like smoke before a fire. Dylan didn't even greet me. "You think you're clever, huh?" he snarled. "You think you're going to win this?" Annette smirked as she kicked off her boots. "You've gone too far, Lydia. We were willing to settle this privately, but now, well, you've left us no choice." I kept my voice steady. "You're trespassing, and I'd like you to leave." Dylan stepped closer. "No, you listen. We're going to the judge with everything. You forged Dad's signature. That was fake. You think anyone's gonna believe a senile old woman pulled together legal documents while her husband was on his deathbed? Annette chimed in, her voice full of venom wrapped in sugar. The media's gonna eat it up, sweetheart. Elderly widow manipulates frail veteran husband into leaving his estate behind, cutting out the kids. We've already got a friend at the local paper. My heart thumped once, loud, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I took 2 steps back and reached for the side table drawer. I opened it, pulled out the black voice recorder I had left sitting in plain view, and pressed play. The room filled with Dylan's voice, recorded just last week. I don't care if she signs or not, I'll take the house anyway. All she does is sit and rot. She won't even know when it's gone. She can have her dead husband's ashes. I'm gonna have the deed. She's too weak to stop me. If that old hag wins, I'll walk on my damn head. The air shifted. Annette's mouth twitched. Dylan's eyes darted to the recorder. Then he lunged. He swiped the device out of my hand and raised it above his head like he meant to smash it right there onto the hardwood floor. But before he could bring it down, a slow, calm voice echoed from behind the velvet curtain that framed the bay window. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Robert stepped out, one hand tucked into his coat pocket, the other holding up a cell phone. Because not only is that obstruction of evidence, he said smoothly, but the entire room has been under surveillance since before you walked in. That camera right there, he pointed to the dusty wall sconce, has already captured this attempted destruction. Say cheese. Dylan froze mid-match. Robert moved closer. I suggest you put the device down gently, Mr. Walker. Unless you'd like the court to see just how respectful you are of due process and elder rights. Dylan slowly lowered his hand. He looked around the room, suddenly unsure of its angles. Annette folded her arms but said nothing. Her confidence cracked like a dry leaf underfoot. I took the recorder back, and this time I smiled. Not cruelly, not even victoriously, just calmly, like a woman who was tired of being underestimated. You've tried to erase me with lawyers, with lies, and now with threats, I said, facing them both. But this house is still mine, and Michael's voice is still in every beam. You won't take that from me, not now, not ever. Robert nodded. You've been warned. Kindly get out before I add criminal trespass to the civil suit. Dylan stared at me, at the woman he once believed would go quietly into her room, into the nursing home, into nothing. But I had one last truth he did not expect. You were right about one thing, Dylan, I said softly. This house does belong to the dead, and they're watching what you do with it. He left in silence. Annette followed, her heels clicking like the last ticks of a clock winding down. When the door closed behind them, I let out the breath I had held since they arrived. Robert poured me another cup of tea and said, You didn't just stand up for yourself today. You stood up for every woman who was ever told to sit down and shut up. I lifted the cup to my lips. It tasted like steel. And survival. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in silence. It was the kind of silence that stretches across a room full of strangers waiting for justice. I sat in the front, my hands folded neatly over the same purse I had carried since Michael bought it for me 40 years ago. The bailiff called the room to order, and I straightened my spine, letting my chin rise just a little higher. Across from me sat Dylan. His face was tight, jaw clenched like it might break. Next to him, Annette whispered something, but he didn't respond. He didn't even look at her. When the judge entered, the room rose. Robert gave me a reassuring nod, then stood to begin what we had worked so long to prepare. Your Honor, he said, calm and clear, this is not a case about inheritance. This is a case about control. It's about a man who tried to erase his mother to get her home. He walked to the screen in front of the jury box and pressed a button on a small remote. And then, everything I had lived through played out in front of the courtroom. The jury watched as Dylan screamed, tore through my drawers, and kicked over my chair. They watched him accuse me of hiding the will in a freezer or inside Michael's clothes. They saw him grab the urn, shake it, and finally smash it to the floor, my husband's ashes spilling like dust over hardwood. Some in the courtroom gasped. Others simply looked away. Robert paused the video. This, he said, is how Dylan Walker treats the woman who gave him life. Then came the audio recordings. I don't care if she signs or not. I'll take the house. She's too weak to stop me. Let her cry over ashes. I want the deed. And finally, the most damning evidence of all. A video of Dylan speaking to the fake doctor he hired. Just say she's confused, she forgets things, enough to get her committed, that's all I need. Once we prove she's out of her mind, I'll handle the papers. The judge sat unmoved, stone-faced. Then came the testimony. First, the actual doctor, Dr. Raymond Pierce, a cognitive specialist with 30 years of experience. He had examined me 2 weeks earlier at Robert's request. Mrs. Walker is perfectly sound in mind, he said under oath. There are no signs of dementia, cognitive decline, or memory loss. In fact, she's sharper than most 70-year-olds I've met. He even added, frankly, I'd trust her memory over half the people in this courtroom. A chuckle rippled through the audience, but the judge silenced it with a glance. Dylan's attorney tried to argue undue influence, claiming I had manipulated Michael while he was sick. But Robert stood up and calmly handed the judge a notarized document. Michael's will, signed months before his stroke, witnessed by 2 neighbors and filed with an attorney whose office still had the original. Then Robert spoke one final time. Michael Walker did not cut his son out of the will out of anger. He did it out of disappointment. Dylan had already sold 2 family properties to cover his debts, lied to his parents, and once tried to take out a second mortgage on this very house without his mother's consent. This wasn't cruelty, it was consequence. The judge sat in silence for a long while. Then finally, he looked up and spoke words I will never forget. This court finds Dylan Walker guilty of elder abuse, fraudulent medical claims, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. The will is declared valid. Effective immediately, Mr. Walker is to have no contact with Mrs. Elizabeth Walker. He is banned from the premises indefinitely and may not come within 100 feet of her or her residence. Dylan collapsed into his chair, like the wind had been knocked from his body. Annette reached for his arm, but then she stood. She looked around the room, saw the eyes staring, judging, and, without a word, gathered her purse and slipped quietly out the back of the courtroom. I watched her leave, not with hate but with a strange kind of peace. She had chosen her role, and I had chosen mine. Robert turned to me and placed a hand over mine. "You did it," he whispered. "No," I said. "Truth did." I stood up slowly as the judge exited. The bailiff gave me a slight nod of respect. I walked past Dylan without looking at him, but I heard him whisper something. "Mom," that one word. Just a whisper. Just a word he used to throw around like it meant nothing. But I kept walking, because I had nothing more to give him. Justice had spoken. My husband's ashes might never be whole again, but his wishes had been honored. My voice had been heard. And I, Elizabeth Walker, 78 years old, walked out of that courtroom not just as a widow, but as a woman who had finally taken her name back. The doors of the courthouse closed behind me with a heavy sound. It did not echo, not in the air, but deep inside me. I stood at the top of the stone steps, clutching the small linen handkerchief in both hands. There were still traces of ash inside, nestled in the seams. The last of Michael, or what was left of him, after the urn shattered on the cold hardwood floor of a house that used to be ours. People passed me by, reporters, lawyers, curious strangers, but I saw none of them. I looked at the fabric in my hand. Michael had always hated linen, said it scratched his skin. But that handkerchief, that one soft square, had sat in his coat pocket for years. He never used it. He said it was for me. "You never know when you'll need to hold something delicate," he once joked. And now, here I was, holding what was left of him. I did not cry. Not when the verdict was read, not when Dylan's face crumpled and he sank like a broken puppet into the courtroom chair, not even when Annette turned her back on him and left him there alone. But now that it was over, I felt something deeper than grief, a hollow quiet, an ache that did not want to scream but settle, because I understood something I had not been ready to say out loud, not until today. "I did not lose my husband the day he died," I whispered to myself, gripping the handkerchief tighter. "I lost my son, the boy I raised, the boy who once cried when his father scraped his knee. That boy is gone. What remains is a stranger who threw my chair into the dirt, smashed our wedding photo, and ground his father's remains into the floor to find a lie that never existed." My throat tightened, but I stood tall, Because even though I had lost something, I had kept something too. But I kept my dignity, and I kept myself. Footsteps approached behind me, slow and familiar. Robert Blackwell stepped up beside me, silent at first. He adjusted his coat, looked out across the street like he was measuring something only he could see. Then he said, quietly, "He would have been proud, Liz." I didn't need to ask who he meant. "Michael. My Michael." Robert glanced sideways. "He told me once back at the hospital, he said, 'If I go first, protect her. But don't pity her. She's stronger than anyone will ever know, but she'll try to suffer in silence. Don't let her.'" I let out the smallest laugh. "That sounds like him." Robert smiled, then nodded toward the street. "I'll call a car. You should rest. Today was—" He trailed off. No need to finish the sentence. "Today," I said, "was the first time I didn't feel invisible in my own life." Robert nodded. As he walked away to wave down a car, I looked up at the sky. The clouds were moving slowly, drawn apart by winter winds. It was colder now, but I did not shiver, because I remembered Michael's voice, not the voice from our wedding or the hospital, but the voice he used when we faced hard times, when the drought nearly ruined the farm, or when the company laid him off, or when I miscarried the child we never spoke of again. "We bend, Lydia, but we don't break." That's what he would say, and so I didn't. I had bent, yes, in silence, in shame, in sorrow, but I had not broken. Not when Dylan threatened to throw me in a home, not when he smashed the urn, not when he tried to erase me from my own house. And now, walking down those steps, I felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, it wasn't, not entirely, but because the weight was no longer mine alone. The truth had been spoken, heard, seen, proven. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out something else, something small and wooden, a corner of the box Michael had once carved by hand, the one where he kept letters he never sent and photos he never showed. I had found it again while cleaning out the house for court. I hadn't opened it yet, but I would, in time, because healing doesn't come like lightning. It comes like sunlight on frost, slowly, steadily, quietly melting what once seemed frozen forever. A soft wind picked up as I stepped onto the sidewalk. The handkerchief fluttered slightly in my grip. I held it tighter, and then I whispered to Michael, wherever he was, "I did not let them take me, and I never stopped loving you," and to Dylan, not aloud, but inside the deepest part of me, I sent one last message. "You chose cruelty. I chose truth, and the truth outlived your mask." I walked on, not looking back, because sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It is about reclaiming the voice they tried to take from you and using it, one quiet, firm step at a time. And that day, outside a courthouse in California winter, I took my first free step in years, and it was enough. It had been 6 weeks since the verdict. The snow had melted from the garden path, leaving behind damp earth and tiny green shoots where Michael once planted peonies. I stood at the threshold of my old home, now mine again, truly and finally mine, and inhaled the stillness. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that used to hurt, not the kind that left me tiptoeing around angry footsteps or whispered judgments. No, this was peace, and I could breathe in it. The living room hadn't changed much. My chair was back by the window. The fireplace, though unused for years, had been swept and cleaned. Robert had insisted on sending someone to fix it. "Winter's not done yet, Lydia," he had said, pressing a small bag of wood chips into my hand. I walked toward the hallway closet, reached high on the top shelf, my fingers brushed against old linen, a forgotten quilt, and finally the smooth surface of the wooden box I had hidden away after Michael passed. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the lace curtains we'd chosen together 30 years ago. The box creaked slightly as I opened it. Inside, a letter in his handwriting, aged paper folded with care. "My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this, it means you had to fight, and knowing you, you did it with a heart bigger than your pain. You were always the reason I tried to be a better man, not just for the world, but for you. If I've gone, I hope the world has not taken your softness from you. I know our son. I know he changed. And I'm sorry for that. But you are the proof that love can outlast anger. that kindness can be firm. If you've won this fight, it's not because of documents or court. It's because you stood your ground with the truth, with dignity, with the kind of strength no one sees coming. That's how I knew I married right. Your voice matters, Lydia. Speak it. With all the love I have, Michael. I closed my eyes. My hands rested over the letter, as if holding his words could bring back the warmth of his hand. He was right. Justice hadn't come with fury or vengeance. It had come because I spoke, after years of silence. After swallowing every insult, every dismissal, every slammed door and cold look, I had finally chosen to be heard. And I was. 2 weeks later, I used the settlement money along with my own savings to do something more. I founded the Michael Walker Dignity Fund. Its purpose? To help seniors who had been mistreated, stolen from, discarded by their families. Those who, like me, had been told they were burdens, useless, better off elsewhere. The first time I stood in front of a small room at a local community center to talk about the program, my hands shook. But then a woman, perhaps in her 80s, slowly raised her hand and asked, "Why don't you just rest? You've been through so much." I smiled. I did rest once, I told her. In Michael's arms, the night he woke up from open heart surgery. He looked at me like I was the reason he lived. That moment, that was heaven enough for me. She smiled back, and in that quiet we understood each other. We weren't done living. I hired a small legal team. Volunteers from Robert's firm helped seniors contest abusive power of attorney documents, investigate false medical claims, and even reconnect with estranged grandchildren who thought their elders had simply gone silent. Word spread, quietly but powerfully. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years came by with flowers and stories of their own mothers. Former church friends left me notes on the porch. Former attorneys left me notes on the porch. Strangers mailed me letters. And every day I walked past the front door and read the wooden sign I hung myself. Property never defines good people, but justice always will. It wasn't carved by a machine. I did it with my own hands. The wood was a bit crooked, the paint uneven, but it was mine. Like this house. Like this voice. One morning, while sipping tea on the porch, I watched a young man pull up in a beat-up sedan. He walked slowly to the porch, clutching a manila envelope. He was shaking. "My name is Paul," he said. "My grandmother died alone last year. We didn't treat her right. I heard about your foundation. I want to help now." I nodded. "Come inside. We'll talk." Because that's the thing about justice. It doesn't end in court. It lives on, in choices, in change, in the quiet turning of tables. And though I lost my son, I had found something greater, the courage to rise, the wisdom to forgive without forgetting, and the power to turn silence into purpose. Michael always said I had a stubborn heart. Turns out that was my greatest inheritance, and I would spend the rest of my days putting it to good use. __. And if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or made to feel like you've outlived your worth, remember this. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And sometimes the quietest hearts leave the loudest echoes. Thank you for listening to my true story. If it touched something inside you, click subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where real voices rise and justice always finds its way home. Because we're not just telling stories, we're reclaiming dignity,